Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere even more confusing than your HMO's customer support line. The doctor's office in the early 1900s. Specifically, we're drifting back to the days when physicians gazed upon the swirling mists of medical knowledge and thought, you know what'll fix everything? Cocaine. Lots of it. And especially for anxious women. So before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy the stuff I do here. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and how late you're up. I want to know who else is trying to fall asleep to the sound of Victorian nonsense. All right, lights down, fan on. Maybe make sure your bedroom isn't haunted by the ghost of Sigmund Freud and get ready to float away. Let's get curious for a second. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to go to the doctor, complain about being a little stressed, and walk out with a prescription for actual, pharmaceutical-grade nose candy? Did doctors ever stop to think, maybe this is too much fun for a medication? Or were they just tossing jars of white powder around the office like it was the world's worst baking show? Did Victorian husbands actually notice their wives had anxiety? Or did they just shout, "Call the doctor! She's reading a book again"? Was the cocaine supposed to make you feel less nervous or just too distracted to notice your own existence? And how did anyone sleep at night knowing the treatment for anxiety could also clean your bathroom grout in 10 seconds flat? And congratulations, you've just woken up in 1903. Your doctor is wearing a bow tie. The air smells like mothballs and questionable optimism. And, good news, your nerves are about to be treated with enough cocaine to tranquilize a circus elephant. Hang on tight. Step into the musty, wallpapered waiting room of Dr. Archibald P. Wellmeaning, where every chair squeaks and the reading material is 3 years out of date. The only thing thicker than the dust is the air of nervous energy, mostly from patients, but a little from the cocaine residue embedded in the furniture. It's 1903, and you're already regretting your decision to see a specialist. You glance around the room, trying not to make eye contact with the potted fern, which looks like it's given up hope entirely and is quietly planning its own escape. The wallpaper is a faded floral pattern, somewhere between antique and crime scene. The scent in the air is a confusing blend of mothballs, liniment oil, and a faint whiff of whatever experimental ointment Dr. Wellmeaning is testing this week. Occasionally, there's an odd chemical note, like someone tried to cover up a medical disaster with a splash of cheap perfume and a prayer. There are 4 other people waiting with you, each performing their own nervous rituals. The elderly gentleman in the corner is reading the same article on tonic, water, miracle or menace, for the 3rd time, occasionally muttering menace, definitely menace under his breath. A young mother is bouncing a toddler on her knee, flipping through a copy of Ladies' Home Journal so ancient it still features ads for arsenic-based cosmetics. Next to you, a severe-looking woman in a starched collar is crocheting what you desperately hope is a scarf and not some sort of Victorian anxiety net. You try to get comfortable in your chair, but comfort is forbidden here. Each seat has been carefully engineered to make you regret your entire skeletal structure. The springs groan ominously every time you shift, and you wonder whether the previous occupant left behind that small, mysterious stain on the upholstery, or if you should just accept that everything in this room has been lightly dusted with regret and powdered nerves. A clock ticks loudly on the wall, but the minute hand seems unsure about moving forward. Time in the waiting room moves differently. Each second lasts at least a week, and the only thing slower than the clock is the progress of the line. Occasionally, the nurse, a young man with sideburns so sharp you could slice bread on them, appears in the doorway, glancing at a clipboard before calling out the next lucky patient. Everyone flinches, There's a sense of communal dread, as if you're all waiting for your number, at a very polite, very well-upholstered guillotine. The art on the walls offers no comfort. In the place of landscapes or friendly still lifes, there are faded medical diagrams, some of which appear to be warning you against the dangers of having a liver. One is an unsettling rendering of the modern female nerve, which just looks like a frazzled tangle of hair and thunderclouds. You wonder how much of this is meant to reassure you, and how much is just Dr. Well-meaning's way of telling you to get used to feeling a little off balance. A tinny piano plays from a phonograph in the next room, piping out a waltz that sounds like it's being performed by someone with only a passing acquaintance with rhythm. You catch yourself humming along, just to distract from the realization that the last time the carpet was cleaned, William McKinley was still president. The nurse pops his head in again, this time asking if anyone needs a glass of water. No one does. You suspect the water comes straight from the same mysterious jug labeled medical use only in the back cabinet. As the moments stretch on, you realize the only people who seem relaxed are the ones who've just come out of Dr. Well-meaning's office, cheerful, energetic, and just a touch too enthusiastic about their upcoming chores. You start to wonder, will you emerge feeling the same? Or will you be the next person to lose a staring contest with the potted fern, forever waiting for your prescription and your chance at relief? You sigh, shift in your chair, and check the clock again. Still only 2 minutes have passed. Welcome to the waiting room, a liminal space where time stands still, dust settles, and every second brings you closer to the world's most energetic cure for the world's most exhausting anxiety. Here's Dr. Well-meaning now, proudly sporting his finest moustache and the kind of diploma you could print at home if you had a typewriter and zero shame. Medical school? Maybe. Enthusiasm for exciting new powders? Absolutely. He greets you with a handshake so firm, you briefly wonder if it's meant to check your pulse. His breath smells faintly of peppermint and something less legal. The light glints off his pince-nez glasses, perched dangerously at the tip of his nose, and you notice his white coat is impeccably pressed, at least from the waist up. Below, his trousers are dusted with something that could be flour, powdered medicine, or the ashes of his last failed experiment. It's best not to ask. Dr. Well-meaning's office is part medical clinic, part personal laboratory, and part Victorian curiosity shop. Behind him, shelves are stuffed with mysterious bottles and hand-labeled jars. You spot tonics promising instant vigor, guaranteed calm, and one with a handwritten label reading simply, "For unspecified agitation." There's a faded anatomy chart, a taxidermy owl, and a gleaming set of brass instruments arranged with the pride of someone who's never had to sterilize anything twice. He gestures for you to sit in a high-backed chair, possibly the most intimidating seat you've ever seen outside a courtroom. "So," he says, tapping his pen thoughtfully on the desk, "what seems to be troubling your nerves today?" You start to explain, but he's already reaching for his notepad, scribbling a few words with the energy of a man who hasn't slept since President McKinley was in office. His interview technique is, in a word, enthusiastic. He asks about your diet. Do you eat at least one hard-boiled egg per day? A. Your exercise habits, brisk walks, or do you prefer chasing stray chickens? And your family history. Anyone else prone to nervousness, dizziness, or spontaneous bursts of interpretive dance? You do your best to answer, but he's moved on. Now he's taking your pulse, not with a watch, but by staring at your wrist and counting out loud with all the accuracy of someone guessing jelly beans in a jar. Every time you mention a symptom, he nods in agreement and offers up a phrase like "classic case," "very fashionable this year," or occasionally, "the spleen's a tricky organ, isn't it?" If you mention feeling tired, he's quick to reassure you. Exhaustion is simply the body's way of asking for more stimulation, easily remedied. If you admit to feeling anxious, he beams. Perfectly normal for a woman of your sophistication. Nothing a little tonic can't fix. Hanging on the wall behind his desk is his diploma. A sheet of paper boasting gold leaf trim, an elaborate signature, and a suspicious number of coffee rings. In fine print, it proclaims him a graduate of the prestigious North American College of General Health and Chemical Experimentation, possibly recognized in some jurisdictions. You squint. Was that a seal or a wine stain? He catches you looking and winks. The best education is hands-on, I always say. He's got all the gadgets. There's a stethoscope that looks like it was invented for listening to whale songs. A wooden tongue depressor that's been reused more times than your mother's favorite casserole dish, and a brass contraption labeled electro-nerve rejuvenator. Just a little jolt to get the thoughts flowing, he says, as you edge your chair back a few inches. And, of course, there's the ever-present jar of cocaine powder on his desk, sitting there like an innocent sugar bowl. He keeps a tiny silver scoop beside it, the kind you'd use to serve caviar if your tastes ran toward high-octane stimulants instead of fish eggs. When the examination is complete, which seems to involve more eyebrow-raising than actual diagnosis, Dr. Well-Meaning leans forward, lowers his voice, and offers you a confidential prescription for Mrs. Peabody's soothing nerve dust. Just a pinch in your morning tea, and you'll be back to your old self. Perhaps even better. Side effects? Oh, nothing. You can't walk off. As you leave his office, you realize you never saw him wash his hands, but you did see him take 2 mysterious pills with a swig from a bottle marked for professional use. You step out into the hallway, clutching your prescription, grateful for modern medicine, and already a little nostalgic for the days when all you needed to be a doctor was a moustache, a bottle of powder, and a really impressive signature. You sit down and explain your symptoms: nerves, sleeplessness, a tendency to sigh at your husband. The doctor listens gravely, nods, and writes hysteria on your chart in beautiful cursive, because every female patient apparently has the same mysterious illness. You try to elaborate. Maybe it's the daily stress of laundry, 3 kids, and a husband who believes the dishes will clean themselves with the power of positive thinking. Perhaps it's the tightness in your chest, or the way your mind races at night, or the fact that your neighbor has started feeding squirrels in a judgmental way. Doctor, Well-Meaning, keeps his eyebrows raised in an expression of deep medical concern. He interrupts only to ask, "And when did you first feel delicate?" as if being anxious was a rare orchid he was trying to spot in the wild. You mention trouble sleeping, and he nods. You mention a sense of restlessness, and he writes something down, possibly a shopping list for more cocaine. But you can't quite see. No matter what you describe, fatigue, sadness, fleeting hopes for independence, it all ends up filed under hysteria. You get the feeling you could announce, "I saw a ghost playing the piano in my pantry," and he'd still respond, "Hysteria. Classic case, run of the mill." He leans back, steeples his fingers, and offers a diagnosis with all the gravitas of a man who once read a book about the Greeks. "You see," he begins, "the female constitution is uniquely susceptible to the modern world's many excitements: streetcars, serial novels, embroidery floss of dubious quality." You nod politely, unsure whether to laugh or hand him your library card for further inspection. It's hard not to notice the difference when Mr. Abernathy comes in next, complaining of headaches and a mysterious urge to nap at work. His diagnosis? Overwork? Possibly heroic constitution? He's sent home with steak, ale, and doctor's orders to avoid any strenuous thinking. You, meanwhile, are given a list of things to avoid: strong emotion, social gatherings, and, most suspicious of all, any topic more stimulating than the weather. You ask if there's anything you can do to help yourself feel better. Dr. Well-Meaning brightens, pulls out a pamphlet titled A Lady's Guide to Nervous Health, and starts reading aloud. Step 1. Rest. Step 2. Avoid intellectual pursuits. Step 3. Take a brisk walk, accompanied, of course. He's got an answer for everything except the real reason you feel anxious in the first place. Modern medicine, at least in the 1900s, is less about discovery and more about elegant handwriting and impressive facial hair. The doctor's toolkit is full of big words, but every answer seems to funnel into the same place. Women are simply too complicated for science, so let's not bother. There's a catch-all diagnosis for every possible complaint, and it's stamped hysteria in ink as permanent as your exhaustion. The prescription? It's always some version of nerve tonic, laced with enough cocaine to make the wallpaper start whispering encouragement. Just a teaspoon every morning, and perhaps you'll stop worrying about, well, everything, he says, scribbling out your prescription like a man who's never actually tasted worry in his life. There's no mention of the actual causes of anxiety. The relentless work, the isolation, the tiny humiliations of daily life, the general feeling that you've been left out of the world's important conversations. The doctor, in his starched collar and powder-scented office, doesn't see any of that. He just sees another hysterical patient, ready to be soothed by the miracle of modern chemistry. You leave with a bottle of restorative elixir, a pamphlet about the dangers of too much reading, and the vague sensation that maybe, just maybe, your real problem is being a woman with opinions in 1903. But at least your diagnosis is clear. It's hysteria. It's always hysteria. And if it isn't, don't worry. They'll invent a new diagnosis for you by next Thursday. Here's where the fun begins. Out comes a little glass vial, a silver spoon, and the cheery assurance that this stimulating tonic is perfectly safe. The fact that it makes you feel like you can clean the whole house in under an hour, just a bonus. Dr. Well-Meaning's eyes light up as he unscrews the vial, careful not to spill any of the precious contents onto his desk. Though, judging by the pale streaks in the grain, a few enthusiastic demonstrations have already taken place. Don't worry, he says, as if reading your mind. This is all the rage in the finest medical journals, and half the advertisements in Ladies' Home Journal. It's even endorsed by some of Europe's most reputable mustaches. You're not sure if he means doctors or just the facial hair, but he's so reassuring that you find yourself nodding anyway. He doles out a measured dose with the tiny spoon, just enough to prove that a little goes a long way, especially if that way is directly up your nostril or dissolved into a morning cup of calming tea. You'll feel an immediate sense of vigor, Dr. Well-Meaning promises, and your worries will melt away like snow in August. He does not mention that you may also develop an urgent desire to alphabetize your entire spice rack and reshingle the roof before lunch. This is the golden age of cocaine. Forget the shadowy reputation it would later develop. In 1903, it's as wholesome as oatmeal and as fashionable as Parisian hats. Cocaine is sold over the counter at every drugstore in town, nestled right between the licorice sticks and the cough drops. There's cocaine for toothaches, cocaine for fatigue, cocaine for those times you feel a bit peaky after hosting your in-laws. One popular product, Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup, contains enough cocaine to tranquilize a barnyard, yet is recommended for children under 6. The advertisements are everywhere, filled with testimonials from smiling housewives who now have the energy of 10 women and local businessmen boasting they've never felt more refreshed at board meetings or funerals. In every glossy magazine, you'll find pictures of bright-eyed Victorians beaming from the page, holding bottles labeled with promises like, guaranteed relief, and no more troublesome feelings, it's hard not to get swept up in the optimism, especially after your first dose. The effects kick in fast. Suddenly, the sun is a little brighter, your hands are a little steadier, and that persistent sense of dread is replaced with the intoxicating conviction that today is the day you will finally reorganize the attic. Your heart beats with the confidence of a circus ringmaster. Even the potted fern in the waiting room seems to sit up straighter. You wonder how you ever lived in a world before such medicinal vigor. There is, of course, a minor side effect. Sleep becomes less a necessity and more of a suggestion, like flossing or writing thank you notes. But who needs rest when you're this productive? Doctors like well-meaning see themselves as pioneers, offering not just hope but excitement. The future of medicine is here, he declares, and you almost believe him, despite the distant sound of someone's teeth chattering in the hallway. Even Sigmund Freud is writing letters about the wonders of cocaine, recommending it to his colleagues, friends, and, occasionally, his own reflection in the mirror. What no one seems interested in discussing is the aftermath. The advertisements don't mention the jittery come-down, the abrupt mood swings, or the creeping suspicion that maybe your newfound superpowers are burning out your candle from both ends. That's a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, you're riding the wave of pharmaceutical progress, powered by a tiny glass vial and the unwavering confidence of a doctor who's never said no to a free sample. So, is cocaine a miracle medicine or a disaster powder? In 1903, the answer is a resounding yes. It's both, sometimes in the same afternoon. And as you leave Dr. Well-Meaning's office, tonic in hand, you can't help but feel a strange mixture of hope, disbelief, and the sudden urge to clean every surface in sight. Welcome to modern medicine at the speed of light. Let's talk about why doctors genuinely thought cocaine was the solution to everything from anxiety to the common cold. Turns out, when you have no clue what's actually happening in the brain, anything white and powdery seems promising. In 1903, science is having a real identity crisis. Half the medical world is convinced that invisible miasmas cause disease, while the other half is busy brewing new tonics in the basement and seeing what happens if you inject frogs with adrenaline. Somewhere in between, your local doctor, armed with a fantastic mustache and maybe a single semester of biology, reads about this incredible new compound called cocaine. The journals say it's invigorating, safe, and ideal for sensitive constitutions. Translation: it makes you feel great, and nobody's checked for side effects yet. There's something deeply comforting, at least to a doctor with a full waiting room and a shaky understanding of neurochemistry, about prescribing a medicine that's so obviously effective. Patients walk in glum and grey, and 10 minutes after a dose, they're not just cured, they're reorganizing his bookshelves and discussing their plans to run for mayor. As far as Dr. Well-Meaning is concerned, that's just good medicine. The truth is, there's a certain logic here. The world of 1903 is exhausting. The days are long, houses are cold, and everyone's diet consists of boiled cabbage and silent desperation. Nerves are frayed, sleep is a distant dream, and the Industrial Revolution has ensured that there's always a new noise or foul smell wafting in from the street. The general public is looking for a pick-me-up, something to chase away the malaise and remind them what it feels like to care, even briefly, about the state of their wallpaper. So, when a German chemist isolates cocaine and the first batch lands in medical circles, it's immediately labeled a wonder drug. Need energy? Cocaine? Stuffy nose? Cocaine. Need to forget that your cousin Stanley just bought an automobile and won't stop talking about it? Double cocaine. The advertisements practically write themselves. The spark of life in every spoonful. And, for the modern woman who has everything, Accept joy. No prescription necessary. Doctors love a cure that works fast. They're living in an era before antibiotics, before effective painkillers, before anyone figured out that washing your hands is more important than wearing a bow tie. When faced with a patient suffering from anything more complicated than a stubbed toe, cocaine offers an instant fix. The patient feels better, the doctor looks brilliant, and nobody has to grapple with pesky things like root causes or actual emotional distress. If a little is good, a lot is better, at least until the wallpaper starts moving. But there's more to it. Medicine at the turn of the century is a strange mix of old wives' tales and wild optimism. In the same office, you might find leeches, electrical gadgets, herbal teas, and a half-finished crossword puzzle. Cocaine just fits right in. A marvel of chemistry, proof that science is winning, and a handy way to keep people coming back for more. Plus, the biggest names in medicine, yes, even Freud, are busy writing papers about the invigorating effects of a quick dose. If the experts are into it, who are you to question their wisdom? Of course, nobody asks too many questions. The occasional case of the jitters is chalked up to enthusiasm. And those rare patients who develop a taste for licking the furniture are quietly advised to cut back a little. The mood is optimistic, the business is booming, and for a brief, glittering window in history, the solution to almost any problem really does come in a small glass vial. In the end, cocaine's popularity isn't about medicine at all. It's about hope. Hope that there's an easy fix, that feeling better is just a prescription away, and that maybe tomorrow's cure won't be quite so exciting. But for now, the doctor's got just the thing, and you leave his office feeling lighter, brighter, and only a little suspicious of how quickly your hands are moving. Welcome to the golden age of prescriptions, where better living through chemistry is less of a slogan and more of a dare. You take your first dose, relief floods your system right before your heart starts beating like a marching band, and you develop a sudden urge to rearrange every piece of furniture in your house. Sleep? Who needs it? For the first 10 minutes, it feels like you've discovered the secret of life. The worries, the aches, the endless parade of tiny, needling frustrations, all gone, swept aside by a tidal wave of energy so intense. You briefly consider jogging to the hardware store just to buy more rags for dusting. Suddenly, your windows are open, the rug is hanging outside, and you're debating whether or not to alphabetize your spice jars by emotional significance. The air seems fresher, your skin tingles, and even your husband's endless opinions on lawn maintenance sound vaguely interesting. Vaguely. It's as if your body's decided to host its own World's Fair. Each organ showing off. Every nerve in celebration. Your hands move faster than your thoughts, which is saying something, because your thoughts are now running relay races. Even your shadow looks peppier. The sense of possibility is endless. Why stop at dusting? Why not repaint the kitchen? Or invent a better mousetrap? Or start a literary magazine from your newly reorganized linen closet? You are a dynamo, a Victorian superhero, powered by science and just the tiniest, legally ambiguous scoop of white powder. Of course, your family is the first to notice the difference. Children are shooed out into the garden for their own safety, while the cat, deeply alarmed by your new speed, retreats under the bed. Your neighbor, Mrs. Peabody, peers through her curtains as you energetically sweep both your porch and hers. For a fleeting moment, you are the envy of the block. Women ask for your secret. Men ask you to slow down so the paint can dry. You ignore them all. You have too much to do. Your doctor, Dr. Well-meaning, calls this the restorative phase. It's what the medical journals are raving about. The miracle of modern nerve tonics. Temporary euphoria, he says with a knowing wink, followed by enhanced productivity and a mild reduction in existential dread. No mention of side effects. Though he does write drink water on the bottle, as if hydration will somehow ground you back in reality when you start reciting Shakespeare at double speed. But after a while, an hour, maybe 2, sometimes 3 if you're lucky, you start to notice a shift. The colors seem less vibrant, the music slows down, your newfound urge to rearrange the entire kitchen fades, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. The 15-minute miracle is wearing off, and the 12-hour crash is gently, almost apologetically, moving in. Suddenly, the sofa you just carried up the stairs seems to weigh 1,000 pounds. Your hands tremble a little. Your mind, which was previously buzzing with plans and optimism, is now running out of fuel. The fatigue hits like a poorly aimed pie at a vaudeville show, messy, undignified, and impossible to ignore. You wonder why the clock has barely moved, why your eyelids feel like sandbags, and why your legs are buzzing even though you're lying completely still. Sleep, which seemed optional mere hours ago, now feels like a distant relative, someone you haven't seen in years but really need to call. You stare at the ceiling and hope for rest, but your heart is still playing the encore from the earlier marching band, and your brain insists on replaying every conversation you've ever had. Meanwhile, the chores you started are only half finished. Your house looks like it's been reorganized by a caffeinated raccoon, and your loved ones approach you as if you might suddenly declare a second spring cleaning. In the quiet, twitchy aftermath, you realize the cure is a little less miraculous than advertised. Dr. Well-meaning calls to check in. How's the tonic working? You mumble something about restorative energy and try not to sound like you've just returned from running a marathon with no shoes and too many existential questions. The next morning, you promise yourself to go easy on the dose. But somewhere in the distance, a tiny glass vial sparkles in the sunlight, and you wonder, just for a moment, if maybe, with the right playlist, you could finish cleaning the attic after all. Welcome to the roller coaster of 1903. Quick fixes, slow crashes, and the strange, stubborn hope that the next dose will finally be the one that gets your living room and your life in perfect order. Next door, the local women's club is abuzz. Word spreads about the new nerve tonic, and soon everyone is dropping by the pharmacy for a little pick-me-up. Afternoon tea just got a lot more interesting. The hostess, Mrs. Dorothea Plum, greets each guest with a kiss on the cheek, a biscuit, and a sly wink. Her parlor, usually reserved for polite conversation and the faint scent of lavender, is now alive with energy. Half the attendees are already on their second cup of tea, their voices rising in a harmonious chorus of, "Have you heard?" and, "Well, I never." You catch sight of Mrs. Elmsworth arranging the petit fours with uncharacteristic speed, while Mrs. Dapplewhite excitedly recounts her experience at Dr. Well-meaning's office, pantomiming the size of the silver spoon with such enthusiasm that someone nearly drops the tray of cucumber sandwiches. Biscuits disappear in a blur. The tea, usually sipped, is gulped down with the fervor of parched explorers in the Sahara. Each delicate porcelain cup is now less a vessel for quiet reflection and more a launchpad for opinions delivered at the speed of light. And all of it, every sparkling anecdote, every raucous laugh, every over-caffeinated opinion on the mayor's choice of hat, traces back to the same source, the newly fashionable nerve tonic. "What is it exactly?" someone asks, as Mrs. Plum refills her cup. The answers tumble over each other. "A modern miracle," claims Miss Hargrove. "A little secret from Vienna," whispers Mrs. Bennet. who once read an article about foreign medical advances. Doctor, well-meaning, says it's as safe as boiled water, and twice as invigorating, pipes up the usually reserved Miss Tomlinson, who is now recounting her experience, alphabetizing her husband's tax receipts at midnight. Everyone nods. At this point, no one really cares what's in it. It could be river water and optimism for all they know. The important thing is that, for the first time in ages, they have energy to spare and gossip to share. Topics veer wildly. Politics, recipes, the mysterious new family who just moved in, whether or not Mrs. Elmsworth's cat is truly part Persian or just part trouble. Someone wonders aloud if the tonic will help with her migraines. Someone else suggests it's perfect for chronic lack of enthusiasm. Even Mrs. Plum's formidable mother-in-law, long considered immune to enthusiasm, is suddenly offering unsolicited advice on wallpaper. Of course, not everyone is convinced. Mrs. Gilling, the town's designated skeptic and part-time potted plant, sips her tea in silence, eyeing the proceedings with a look of mild concern. "Should we really be taking something we can't pronounce?" she asks. Just as Mrs. Plum uncorks a fresh bottle and passes it around the room with the cheerful efficiency of a sommelier at a wine tasting. "Oh, don't be such a worrier," laughs Mrs. Dapplewhite. "It's all the rage in New York. My cousin wrote to me. She's never wrong, except about her third marriage." Before long, the parlor becomes an impromptu brainstorming session. Mrs. Plum proposes forming a new reading circle, one that meets every morning, just to get things done. Someone else suggests entering the annual charity bazaar as a team. Mrs. Bennet wants to start a petition for a new library. By the time the lemon cakes are served, at least 3 new committees have been founded, and someone is halfway through rewriting the club's bylaws. The energy in the room is contagious and just a little terrifying. The men, wisely, keep their distance. Mr. Plum pops his head in, sees his wife leading a rousing debate about suffrage and sofa cushions, and quietly retreats. The postman, usually greeted with polite smiles, is now subjected to a rapid-fire interrogation about mail delivery efficiency and the pros and cons of wax seals. As the luncheon ends, the guests drift home, some to start ambitious cleaning projects, some to pen spirited letters to distant relatives, and a few just to sit quietly and marvel at how interesting their lives have suddenly become. In the age of the nerve, tonic, even the most ordinary afternoon tea feels like the beginning of a very exciting revolution, one powered by biscuits, gossip, and a little white powder nobody's quite ready to question. Welcome to the new golden age of women's clubs, where the biscuits vanish, the teacups multiply, and nobody, not even Mrs. Gilling, wants to miss the next meeting. Over at the corner drugstore, Mr. Whipple can't keep cocaine in stock. He sells it over the counter, no prescription needed, right next to the licorice candy and cough drops. The best-selling product? Cocaine toothache drops for children. You step through the creaking door of Whipple's pharmacy and immediately inhale the signature scent, part peppermint, part varnish, and part something unidentifiable but very much awake. The shelves are crowded with glass bottles, paper-wrapped boxes, and tins so colorful they might be edible. Some of them actually are. There's a cheerful jingle playing from the phonograph in the corner, but the real music is the bell above the door, ringing every time another hopeful customer comes in for a remedy or, failing that, a chat and a peppermint stick. Mr. Whipple himself is a vision of professional energy. His bow tie is always slightly crooked, his hair always perfectly slicked, and his fingers permanently dusted with a powder he swears is just from the cough drops. He greets you with the enthusiasm of a man who knows the secret to everyone's happiness. And that secret is conveniently stocked on aisle 2. There's a product for every ailment, real or imagined. Feeling low? Try Dr. Haverford's invigorating elixir. Coughing? 1 spoonful of Mrs. Bonham's lung tonic. But it's the cocaine shelf that gets the most attention. There's cocaine lozenges for sore throats, cocaine ointment for tired muscles, and yes, cocaine toothache drops, right in a little bottle with a picture of a smiling child on the front, holding an improbably white tooth and waving like he's proud. Just seen the dentist's credit line. Parents line up at the counter, children in tow, all eager for the fastest cure in town. Mrs. Tilling, whose youngest has been teething for 6 months, buys 3 bottles with a grateful sigh. Mr. Haskell, suffering from nerves after a particularly loud Sunday sermon, grabs a jar, just in case. Even the town mayor, who has absolutely no children at home but does have a suspiciously sparkling set of teeth, slides a bottle into his coat pocket with a conspiratorial wink. No prescription is required. Mr. Whipple is happy to sell to anyone. Mothers, grandfathers, the odd dog walker, no questions asked. If you're feeling especially daring, you can even try the new cocaine wine, imported straight from Europe and marketed as the drink for modern living. It's best not to ask what's in the cough syrup. Spoiler, it's cocaine, with a whisper of cherry. The advertising is relentless. Posters on the windows feature robust, smiling children, energetic housewives, and men who have just chopped down an entire forest with their bare hands. There are testimonials in the local paper. Little Billy slept through the night, and Grandma hasn't felt this lively in years, all accompanied by enthusiastic recommendations to ask Mr. Whipple for the genuine article. Of course, the back room is where things get really interesting. That's where Mr. Whipple keeps the special orders. Extra strong tonics for the truly persistent toothaches, midnight deliveries for the insomniacs, and the occasional rush shipment for the ladies' club who claim it's for the bake sale. There's an unspoken rule in town. If you want results, you go to the doctor. If you want results fast, you go to Mr. Whipple. Children love the stuff. 1 drop of those toothache drops and not only is the pain gone, but little Tommy is organizing the pantry and running laps around the backyard. School teachers report a mysterious rise in enthusiasm during spelling bees. Sunday, school is now less about quiet reflection and more about keeping the hymn books from flying off the shelves. The local dentist, he's never been busier. Nobody connects the dots between the sudden flood of jittery children and the empty cocaine display at Whipple's. If anything, it's a sign of a town that's thriving, energetic, chatty, and only occasionally a little too lively for its own good. By closing time, the cocaine shelf is empty, and Mr. Whipple is already writing next week's order. Don't worry, he tells you with a grin. The next batch arrives Thursday, just in time for the weekend rush. And so, in the golden glow of the pharmacy's windows, you watch another generation discover the miracle of modern medicine. 1 tiny glass bottle at a time. While women get prescribed cocaine for hysteria, men are told to try a brisk walk and think about baseball. Gender roles in 1903, confusing, hilarious, and mostly solved with narcotics. Imagine you're a woman in 1903. Your nerves are frayed from a week of unending chores, a teething toddler, and your husband's attempt at fixing the coal stove. You head to Dr. Well-meaning, pour your heart out. And, after a brief pulse check and a long stare into the middle distance, he solemnly prescribes a teaspoon of nerve tonic, heavy on the cocaine and light on the science. Rest, dear lady, he intones. Avoid exertion. Try not to read the newspaper. And certainly don't trouble yourself with arithmetic. Now, picture your husband. Same house, same drafty bedroom, same mysterious rash spreading up his left leg. He shuffles in to see the doctor, clears his throat, and admits, almost in a whisper, that he feels a bite off. Maybe it's nerves. Maybe it's the new boss at the mill. Or maybe it's the creeping suspicion that he's never going to master the newfangled lawnmower. Doctor, well-meaning, listens, nods, and immediately offers a completely different approach. What you need is fresh air. A nice, bracing walk. Find a field. Think about baseball. You'll be right as rain in no time. It's hard to overstate just how unhelpful this advice can be when your mind is chewing on worry like a terrier on a bone. But there's an unwritten rule. Men's nerves are best ignored. Or, if that fails, walked into submission. Women's nerves, on the other hand, are a medical mystery, requiring immediate chemical intervention, and maybe, just maybe, a fainting couch. Back at home, the differences play out like a low-stakes farce. Your husband returns from his doctor's visit, pockets full of hard candies, and his mind occupied with baseball stats, only to find you rearranging the kitchen chairs at lightning speed. Doctor's orders, you shrug, dashing off to alphabetize the spice rack. He watches in confusion, unsure whether to feel impressed or worried about the state of your cuticles. On Sunday, the church bulletin contains subtle clues to the town's collective mental health. The Prus, men's walking club, is full to bursting, each member pretending not to notice the other's nervous twitch. Meanwhile, the women's reading circle has evolved into a high-speed quilting bee, fueled by the latest batch of nerve tonic and an almost alarming number of lemon cakes. Mrs. Peabody, who used to faint at the sight of thunder, is now organizing the bake sale and lobbying for municipal flower boxes simultaneously. Every family has their own story. At the dinner table, you listen to your husband describe his brisk constitutional, while you try to ignore the persistent tingling in your teeth and the fact that you've started thinking in lists. He tells you the doctor says not to worry, just to keep walking and maybe take up whittling. You nod, wondering if a brisk walk might help your heart stop racing like it's late for a train. Maybe you'll try it, or maybe you'll just reorganize the pantry. Again, the truth is, neither approach really solves anything. The women's club is still anxious and now slightly more energetic. The men's club still haunted by vague worries and sore calves. The difference is that the women are dealing with it in a cloud of medical optimism, while the men are left with the uneasy sense that someone, somewhere, is getting a better deal, probably involving cocaine. Meanwhile, the children watch, wide-eyed, as their parents oscillate between high-speed furniture rearrangement and endless walks around the block. The cat refuses to come inside. The dog is developing his own nervous habits. In 1903, gender roles are as rigid as a starched collar, but everyone's a little bit anxious and nobody's quite sure why. But rest assured, Doctor, well-meaning, has a cure for that. Or at least, he has a story, a bottle of tonic, and an unwavering belief in the healing power of fresh air and denial. Welcome to the era when don't worry about it was a prescription. Get some. Rest was gendered. And the real miracle cure was making it to the end of the week without reorganizing the neighbor's garden or running away to join the men's walking club. Let's talk about the other wonders of the era, like Dr. Snake Oil's patent Vim Elixir, which contains a delightful mix of cocaine, morphine, alcohol, and the tears of disappointed family members. If the cocaine didn't work, there was always something even more questionable. The world of 1903 is absolutely crawling with miracle cures, all conveniently available for cash, check, or IOU. Traveling medicine shows roll through town with the confidence of a circus, and the medical credibility of a stray dog. Their wagons are painted in the brightest colors money can buy, or at least money can borrow from the local pawn shop, and every stop is a show. The air is full of promises, perfumed lineaments, and the sort of bravado that can only be brewed in a jug behind someone's barn. Here comes Dr. Ezekiel T. Snake Oil himself, leaping off the back of a promises man, wagon that reads, "Guaranteed remedies for all that ails ye." He wears a silk hat, a coat with more pockets than seems medically necessary, and the sort of grin that could sell snow to a polar bear. The town gathers around as he launches into a patter about the wonders of his Vim elixir. The one elixir to cure headaches, heartbreak, indigestion, hair loss, marital malaise, and the common fear of Tuesdays. For only 25 cents a bottle, you too can experience the dizzying benefits of his secret recipe, a concoction so potent it makes your tongue go numb before your worries. Dr. Snake Oil demonstrates by pouring a generous dose into the open mouth of the bravest local volunteer, usually a teenager or a man who lost a bet, who immediately stands up straighter, smiles wide, and starts reciting the town's founding charter from memory. "See?" crows the doctor. "Nothing short of a miracle. And that's just the opening act." His wagon is filled with treasures: Dr. Fizzlebottom's restorative bitters, Aunt Mildred's spleen tonic, and Professor Nervewater's quick-acting drops. All proudly unregulated, untested, and, thanks to the federal government still debating what counts as medicine, perfectly legal. Labels promise not just relief, but glory. Guaranteed to increase stamina and moral fiber. Will put hair on your chest, or at least your neighbor's. Fine print is optional, and usually says something about results may vary and not responsible for sudden disappearances. Inside, each bottle is a magical blend of whatever the pharmacist swept up that morning. Opium for the pain, cocaine for the pep, alcohol for the courage, and, just in case, enough sugar to rot every tooth in your head. With each dose, you feel better for 10 minutes, then worse, then somehow convinced you need another bottle. Side effects may include dizziness, euphoria, night terrors, an overwhelming urge to write poetry, and, of course, an empty wallet. Your own medicine cabinet, if you dare to look, has become a museum of questionable decisions: brown bottles with peeling labels, tins of effervescent nervine salts, and a small crate of mystery plasters that no one in the family will touch, not after what happened to Uncle Gerald. The family dog eyes the lot suspiciously, having learned to recognize the telltale sound of a cork being popped as a sign to hide under the porch. Everyone's got their favorite, Mrs. Plum swears by Mother's Little Helper, the bottle with a skull and crossbones on the side and a warning not to operate farm equipment. Mr. Plum prefers Vim elixir. It's the only thing that gets him through the annual audit. The children, naturally, are forbidden from touching anything but have learned that a little cough and comfort syrup helps them get out of chores and into the neighbor's treehouse at record speed. And when all else fails, there's always the town barber, who, for an extra nickel, will throw in a restorative tonic and a story about the time he survived typhoid by drinking nothing but warm gin and snake oil. In the end, it's hard not to marvel at the sheer creativity of the era's medical entrepreneurs. If one remedy doesn't work, don't worry. There's another bottle, another show, another elixir rolling in on the next wagon. The only thing more plentiful than the cures is the hope that maybe, just maybe, one of them will actually work. And if it doesn't, well, at least you'll have a good story and a spectacular headache to remember it by. Enter Sigmund Freud, the world's most famous early cocaine influencer. He prescribes it for everything, tries it himself, and writes long, confusing letters about how stimulating it is for scientific inquiry. Yes, this is real. Picture the scene. It's Vienna in the 1880s, and young Dr. Freud is hunched over his desk, pen flying, mustache bristling with intellectual fervor. He's on the verge of discovering the unconscious mind. But first, he must test the boundaries of consciousness, ideally by sampling generous amounts of cocaine. After all, how can you really trust your own theories until you've written them on 3 hours sleep, and the kind of confidence that only comes from a scientific stimulant? Freud isn't alone. The scientific community is positively fizzing with excitement over this miracle compound from South America, while the rest of Vienna is struggling through the morning on coffee and stale bread. Freud is in his lab, grinding cocaine leaves, dissolving powder, and making notes that bounce between profound and, frankly, a little unhinged. "Marvelous," he declares in one letter. "It lifts the spirits." In another, he casually mentions that after a dose he can work for hours, possibly days, without stopping, pausing only to write to his fiancée about his superior productivity and invincible cheer. Of course, Freud is a generous man. He doesn't keep this miracle to himself. He sends cocaine samples to colleagues, friends, and even ailing family members. Got a toothache? Cocaine. Tired from travel? Cocaine. Nervous before a big exam? Double cocaine. For a brief, glittering moment, half the intellectual elite of Europe is testing Freud's new favorite remedy. If anyone feels jittery, they chalk it up to the thrill of scientific discovery, or possibly the cheese. Freud is convinced he's on the brink of something big. He publishes articles about cocaine's power to cure morphine addiction, melancholia, indigestion, shyness, and his favorite, nervous exhaustion. The science is, let's say, enthusiastic. For a man so preoccupied with the hidden impulses of the mind, Freud is cheerfully open about his own. He writes that cocaine is a magical drug, describing its beneficial effect on mood, digestion, and intellectual labor. Even his dog is rumored to be a little more energetic than usual. The side effects, however, are a different story. After a few months, Freud's letters grow more erratic. "I am feeling slightly irritable," he admits in one, before launching into an 18-page explanation of why his neighbor's violin playing might be a metaphor for unresolved childhood conflict. His friends begin writing back, diplomatically suggesting perhaps a little less stimulation is in order. Freud shrugs them off. After all, a man of science must be willing to push the limits, not to be outdone. Freud's colleagues launch their own experiments. Dr. Fleischl-Marxau, suffering from chronic pain, receives a hearty recommendation from Freud. "Cocaine will help," he insists. Fleischl-Marxau obliges, and soon becomes one of Europe's first recorded cases of cocaine addiction. Oops. Freud's notes on this unfortunate development are extensive, if not entirely apologetic. But for a while, the legend grows. Freud's name becomes synonymous with intellectual vigor and the slightly unnerving sensation that your analyst hasn't blinked since last Tuesday. He holds forth in Viennese coffeehouses, lecturing on dreams, symbolism, and the profound effect of cocaine on psychic energy. People take notes. People take cocaine. People occasionally wander into the street to reorganize lampposts. It's only later, when the side effects become harder to ignore, that Freud quietly backs away from his boldest claims. He never quite admits that maybe, just maybe, prescribing cocaine for everything was a touch premature. But by then, the era's most influential thinker has already helped spark a global trend. If you're feeling low, tired, shy, or overwhelmed by your inner child, why not try a little chemical enlightenment? In the annals of medical history, Freud's cocaine phase stands as a monument to optimism, curiosity, and the enduring human belief that the answer to life's mysteries is probably sitting in a glass vial on your desk. And if that answer makes you want to alphabetize your subconscious, all the better. Every home has a little box stuffed with powders and tonics. Because when your daughter is sad, your son is hyper, or grandma can't sleep, the answer is always just a teaspoon away. The 1900s version of Take Two and Call Me in the Morning was sniff, stir, repeat. The family medical kit sits proudly on the kitchen shelf, wedged somewhere between the molasses and the just-in-case emergency ham. It's a wooden box, battered by time and sticky with generations of optimism. When anyone feels a twinge, a tickle, or a bout of existential dread, out comes the box with all the ceremonial grandeur of a medieval relic. The lid creaks open, revealing a glittering array of home remedies. Glass bottles with handwritten labels, tins that rattle ominously, and folded paper packets full of mysterious white powder. Some even have corks so ancient they look fossilized. You're not quite sure what half of it is for, and you're absolutely certain none of it came with instructions. There's restorative salts for nerves, soothing cordial for hiccups, headaches, and heartbreak, liniment for all pains, for everything except paper cuts, which require bravery and divided by or whiskey, and, of course, the ever-present cocaine powder. Lest you think this is limited to adults, the children's corner of the box includes calming syrup, teething dust, and quiet baby drops, each of which is roughly as safe as leaving your toddler alone with a set of fireworks. Whenever a new symptom arises, it becomes a family event. Someone fetches the box, everyone gathers around, and there's a lively debate about which bottle to use. Should we try the blue one? The green one? The one that smells like menthol and ambition? Grandma, the de facto house physician, makes the final call. She has years of experience and a philosophy that can be summed up as, if it didn't kill your uncle, it probably won't kill you. Measuring is more of an art than a science. Teaspoons are heaped, drops are guessed, and anything that fizzes gets extra points for excitement. Grandma's motto: if 1 spoonful is good, 2 must be better, and 3 will get you to church on time. Nobody in the family trusts the scale that came with the kit. It hasn't balanced since the Garfield administration. Every night, the ritual repeats. Your father, coming home with sore muscles, gets a liniment rub down and a hot toddy for circulation. Your brother, unable to sit still, is handed a dose of calming tonic so potent he spends the next 2 hours quietly counting the knots in the floorboards. Your mother, plagued by the vapors, is offered a fragrant whiff from a mysterious vial, followed by a cup of tea so invigorating she alphabetizes the entire pantry before bed. The family dog, meanwhile, knows to hide under the sofa whenever the box comes out. Accidents, naturally, happen. Nobody talks about the time Aunt Gertrude mixed up the gentle laxative with the nighttime soother. The family still remembers the great lively sleepover of '97, where half the cousins spent the evening racing around the parlor, and the other half slept standing up. And then there's Grandpa's infamous DIY tooth extraction kit, which was less about dentistry and more about finding out how loudly a grown man can yell. Still, there's a sense of pride in managing your own medical adventures. Who needs a doctor when you have a shelf full of optimism and an endless supply of herbal cures? The community swaps recipes for new syrups, and everyone has a theory about which neighbor's elixir is the most effective. The line between medicine and dessert blurs on Sundays. when the children line up for tonic and cookies, just in case one cancels out the other. In the end, the home medical kit is less a symbol of preparedness and more a testament to hope, trial and error, and the iron stomachs of your ancestors. You fall asleep with the faint taste of camphor on your tongue and a sense that, if nothing else, tomorrow's solution is only a teaspoon away. After all, in the early 1900s, self-care meant taking matters, and more than a little medicine, into your own hands. Let's zoom in. Why did so many women end up with this diagnosis? Was it nerves? Was it boredom? Or was it just that having emotions was considered a medical emergency? To be a woman in the Victorian and Edwardian eras was to walk a social tightrope, strung between polite invisibility and sudden, mysterious illness. The rules were simple. Don't be too loud, don't be too quiet, don't want too much, and, most importantly, don't let anyone know you're human. If you managed all that, you might escape the dreaded label of hysterical. Spoiler: almost no one escaped. Daily life offered plenty of opportunities for anxiety to blossom. Most women were expected to keep an entire household running with military precision while wearing 3 layers of wool and a corset tight enough to turn deep breaths into Olympic sport. The day started at dawn with a laundry list of chores: feeding the family, wrangling children, sewing, cleaning, and listening to your husband's opinions on the correct way to butter toast. All with a smile and the serene composure of a saint on a greeting card. Add to that the lack of privacy. If you weren't sharing a home with your mother-in-law, you were at least sharing your medical history with the entire neighborhood. There was no therapy, no yoga, and the only self-help book was the Bible. And even then, the most relevant advice was, be patient. If you ever hinted that things weren't perfect, you got a well-meaning visit from the Ladies' Society, bearing casserole and judgment. Emotions, unfortunately, were not on the approved list. Frustrated by housework? Must be the nerves. Weary of social obligations and endless embroidery? Clearly a case of female melancholy. Longing for something more than Thursday? Is liver night? That's not ambition. That's a wandering womb. In a society where even wanting to read the newspaper could get you labeled difficult, anxiety wasn't just common, it was practically compulsory. Doctors, in all their wisdom, did their best to help. Rest, they said, and avoid excitement. For some, this meant being packed off to a rest cure in a chilly sanatorium, where you could stare at the ceiling for weeks and be discouraged from anything as dangerous as reading or thinking too hard. For others, it meant being handed a bottle of nerve tonic and advised to stay away from politics, novels, and rooms painted in bright colors. Marriage was supposed to be the cure for all ills, but often it was the origin story. If you complained of anxiety before your wedding, you were told, just wait, marriage will settle you. If you complained after, you were told, well, now you have responsibilities. The only thing more certain than a bout of nerves was the chorus of advice from every corner. Eat more, eat less. Take a walk, don't go outside. Rest more, help more, have another child, maybe fewer children. And whatever you do, don't think about it. If you did seek medical help, you'd often find yourself across from a doctor with the emotional range of a carrot. Symptoms? He'd ask. You'd mention sadness, restlessness, or even a desire for more out of life. Hysteria, he'd nod. Or possibly your uterus is plotting an escape. Treatments ranged from the patronizing, gentle walks to the outright bizarre electric baths, vibrating chairs, and of course, a refreshing teaspoon of cocaine powder. And heaven help you if you were unmarried, childless, or interested in suffrage. That was a surefire way to get diagnosed with overstimulation of the female faculties, also known as wants to read a book and vote. For many women, the only socially acceptable place for emotion was fainting on a velvet chaise. Anything else? And you'd better be prepared for the family to whisper about your delicate constitution. So yes, women were anxious, because being alive in 1903 and wanting anything at all was, for women, a minor act of rebellion. In a world where having feelings was an illness, it's a wonder anyone survived with their sense of humor intact. But survive they did, quietly, resiliently, and sometimes with a teaspoon of something a little stronger than tea. If you were tired, sad, restless, angry, hungry, or just reading too many novels, you had hysteria. The prescription? A white powder, some rest, and definitely no voting. Let's be honest. Hysteria is the ultimate medical catch-all of the era. A diagnosis so broad it could sweep up nearly any woman, at nearly any time, for nearly any reason. Wake up tired after a night of your husband snoring? Hysteria. Tear up at a play? Hysteria. Have the audacity to speak your mind at a family dinner? Oh, you'd better believe that's a bad case of nerves. In a world where emotional flexibility is limited to the range between pleasantly docile and politely exhausted, hysteria is the all-purpose label for anything remotely human. The symptoms read like a menu at an underfunded spa. Headaches, fatigue, anxiety, boredom, irritability, cravings for adventure, unexplained energy, unexplained tiredness, sudden fits of laughter, unseasonable melancholy, wanting a snack after 9 p.m., and a suspicious fondness for poetry. And yes, there's a special warning in every medical pamphlet about the dangers of overly passionate reading. As if Jane Austen is a controlled substance and Emily Dickinson could send you straight to the sanatorium. You visit Dr. Well-Meaning, who listens with the sympathetic detachment of someone contemplating lunch. No matter what you describe, the answer is the same. It's hysteria, my dear. Very common, very treatable. If you protest that you're simply hungry, he'll nod and say, a most classic presentation. If you admit to being bored, he'll suggest a change of scenery, followed by a rest, provided it doesn't involve going anywhere interesting. Treatment is a ritual unto itself. Your prescribed rest, which means being confined to bed, ideally in a room painted a calming shade of beige. If you're lucky, someone will bring you a novel, but only if you promise to skip the exciting chapters. Exercise is frowned upon. So is laughter, excessive talking, or any activity that might indicate you're not actually dying. Instead, you're encouraged to nap, reflect, and sip the occasional glass of sherry, all while contemplating your sins, chiefly that you ever wanted to do anything at all. And then there's the medicine. Out comes the nerve tonic, the so-called restorative powder. It's cocaine, of course, but nobody mentions that part. 1 teaspoon, and suddenly the walls are less beige, your worries less pressing, and you're filled with the vague sense that, if allowed, you could probably conquer the world, or at least reorganize the entire linen closet before sundown. The doctor assures you it's perfectly safe. All the best homes use it, he says, as if this were a new model of carpet sweeper, and not a one-way ticket to insomnia. The most important part of your treatment, though, is the strict prohibition against agitation. Agitation, in this context, means thinking about things that don't concern you, like politics, money, or your own ambitions. Voting is especially discouraged. Nothing upsets the female constitution more than the ballot box, the doctor warns. As if the real threat to your well-being is civic engagement rather than the constant pressure to smile through existential dread. For the truly incurable cases, there's always the rest cure. a charming retreat to a sanitarium, where professional staff will make sure you don't strain yourself by engaging in conversation, creativity, or hope. Letters from home are carefully censored, and the only thing more closely watched than your pulse is your bookshelf. By the time you're pronounced better, you're more bored, more restless, and, thanks to the powder, just a little too enthusiastic about alphabetizing the family recipes. But that's progress. At least you're not voting. Hysteria, in the end, is the diagnosis with infinite symptoms and exactly one solution. Stop being inconvenient, stop being interesting, and take your powder like a good patient. In the grand tradition of medical history, it's less about healing and more about keeping everyone quietly in their place. And if that sounds exhausting, well, you know what the doctor would call it. You check into the local sanatorium, ready for a month of relaxing baths, gentle walks, and of course, regular cocaine treatments. It's the world's least restful vacation. From the moment you arrive, there's a strange sense of anticipation in the air. Somewhere between summer camp, silent retreat, and low-security prison, you're greeted by Matron Bellows, a woman whose starched collar could cut glass and whose definition of restful includes military-style wake-up calls and an ironclad prohibition on excitement. She welcomes you with a smile that never quite reaches her eyes and a clipboard bristling with dietary restrictions. The room is plain but oddly cheerful, painted in a color best described as hospital oatmeal. There's a bed with sheets crisp enough to file papers on, a tiny window overlooking the courtyard, more mud than roses, and a side table already stocked with bottles and powders. For your nerves, Matron Bellows intones, depositing a glass of water and a teaspoon of something white and suspiciously invigorating. Your days are meticulously planned. You start with a restorative bath, which in practice means sitting in a large porcelain tub while a nurse pours in a rotating medley of mineral salts, rose petals, and enough eucalyptus oil to stun a moose. The water is always slightly too cool, and the towels are always slightly too damp. If you so much as sigh contentedly, Matron Bellows appears with a reminder to conserve your emotional energy. After your bath, you're encouraged to take a gentle walk around the grounds. This is less a stroll and more a parade of patients shuffling in silence, robes flapping, all carefully monitored by attendants wielding stopwatches. Conversations are discouraged, restful minds are quiet minds. But you occasionally catch a fellow inmate, guest, muttering about the state of the scones. Lunch arrives at noon on the dot. The food is bland but plentiful. Chicken broth, stewed prunes, and a biscuit so dry, you wonder if it's part of the therapy. For dessert, another spoonful of nerve tonic, guaranteed to keep you bright-eyed through even the most tedious afternoon lecture on the dangers of embroidery. The afternoons are a blur of scheduled inactivity. Rest hour means lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and trying not to think about the list of chores piling up at home. If you're caught reading, the book is swiftly replaced with a pamphlet titled Why Stillness Heals. Occasionally, there's light exercise, which means gently squeezing a rubber ball and being praised for appropriate restraint. The true spa highlight is, of course, the treatments. You receive the latest in modern medical science, gentle electrical stimulation to awaken the humors, vibratory massages, and, for the more anxious, a quick whiff of medicinal ether. But nothing is as popular as the regular cocaine dose. Each patient is summoned, given a measured spoonful, and sent back to their room, where the walls suddenly seem brighter and the sheets just a little less prison issue. The evenings are reserved for reflection. You gather in the lounge, sipping chamomile tea and pretending you aren't wide awake and slightly jittery. The staff encourages group gratitude exercises. Everyone takes turns sharing what they're most thankful for. The towels were only mildly damp today. Nobody fainted during lunch. The cocaine hasn't run out yet. Bedtime is at 8, lights out by 8:30, and if you're still awake at midnight, congratulations, so is everyone else. By the end of your stay, you're physically rested, mentally restless, and spiritually ready to go home and take a long nap. The only thing you've really recovered is a renewed appreciation for chaos and a slightly concerning fondness for mineral baths and white powder. So much for the restful cure. As you pack your bags, Matron Bellows bids you farewell, handing you a pamphlet titled Tranquility for the Modern Nerve and a complimentary bottle of sanatorium blend to help ease your transition back to real life. You step outside, lungs full of fresh air, mind full of nervous energy, and swear never to vacation somewhere that thinks tranquility comes with a side of stimulants. You'd think someone would notice the growing number of people talking a mile a minute, reorganizing their pantries at 2 a.m., and occasionally hallucinating Victorian wallpaper. But, hey, everyone's just glad you're not crying. For a while, it feels like the neighborhood has been possessed by the world's most enthusiastic cleaning fairy. Everywhere you turn, curtains are being washed, rugs are being beaten with unprecedented fervor, and every garden gate is swinging on well-oiled hinges. The Ladies' Club holds an emergency meeting to discuss the rise in domestic efficiency, only to discover that every member has already alphabetized her spice rack and started a side hustle in marmalade production. At the Men's Walking Club, even the laziest members have taken to jogging laps, sometimes backwards, just for variety. No one quite makes the connection between the sudden spike in energy and Dr. Well-Meaning's magic powder. Why would they? It's medicine, after all. If you feel lively, it's just the restorative powers of science. If you feel restless, it's probably time for another dose. If you haven't slept in 3 days and the wallpaper pattern starts to look like it's spelling out Morse code messages, you chalk it up to nerves and vow to hang different curtains. Nighttime, always a challenge in the early 1900s, has now become an adventure. All over town, windows glow late into the evening as women reorganize sock drawers, iron everything in sight, and write lengthy letters to distant cousins about the relative merits of lavender sachets. Husbands, attempting to sleep, grumble good-naturedly before rolling over and pretending not to notice the soft rustle of papers and the quiet sound of someone alphabetizing recipe cards by moonlight. Insomnia sweeps through the town like a mild scandal. At first, everyone is delighted by how much they can accomplish with so little rest. Why waste time sleeping when you could knit 3 scarves, bake a dozen lemon cakes, and develop a new filing system for the local library, all before sunrise? Sleep is for the weak becomes the rallying cry of the over-medicated. If you do manage to sleep, it's a jittery, light affair, punctuated by dreams of racing against laundry baskets or giving stirring speeches to rooms full of enthusiastic houseplants. The social impact is remarkable. Sunday sermons are twice as lively, with the congregation nodding along at a speed that has the minister worried he might accidentally summon a revival. Children, dosed with tonic for their nerves or teething pains, run laps around the schoolhouse, while teachers take notes for future studies on perpetual motion. Even the local pets are suspiciously high-strung. The town cat has taken to hunting shadows with alarming intensity, and the family dog now requires 2 walks just to tire out. Side effects are, of course, not limited to sleeplessness and energy. The town grocer reports a 400% rise in sales of sugar, flour, and candles. The postman, besieged with letters written between midnight and dawn, starts wearing earplugs to muffle the constant sound of typewriter keys. Some residents mention a mild buzzing in the teeth or the irresistible urge to redecorate, but Dr. Well-Meaning assures everyone that these are perfectly natural signs of robust health. By the third week, though, cracks begin to show. Tempers run short. Eyes develop a permanent twitch. The schoolmistress is caught lecturing a coat rack. And several local mothers break into tears when they run out of lemon oil for the furniture. The ladies' club, formerly so productive, dissolves into chaos when someone suggests taking a break. No one remembers how. Still, no one wants to be the first to complain. If the choice is between sleepless energy and melancholy, everyone would rather be awake and busy, even if it means the occasional hallucination or reorganizing the pantry twice in one night. After all, in 1903, the only thing worse than being unproductive is being seen as overly sensitive. And so, the cycle continues. Another dose, another sleepless night, another perfectly alphabetized spice rack. Welcome to the new normal, where the real side effect is an entire town convinced that sleep is optional, productivity is everything, and the only thing to fear is running out of tonic before the next full moon. Dr. Well-Meaning starts every day with a taste test, just to make sure the batch is still medicinal. Suddenly, the whole town is running on cocaine, caffeine, and the eternal hope that no one will ever invent malpractice insurance. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when your community's most trusted medical professional is perpetually testing the product, here's a clue. Dr. Well-Meaning is always just a bit too enthusiastic. He greets patients with a handshake that borders on a minor chiropractic adjustment and a grin so wide it threatens the structural integrity of his moustache. His eyes are bright, his speech is rapid fire, and he has an unfortunate habit of tapping out musical numbers with his pen while writing prescriptions. The waiting room staff long ago learned to recognize the energized days. Days when Dr. Well-Meaning will call 3 patients at once, conduct a diagnosis standing up, and decide that the best place to keep his stethoscope is around his neck, under his arm, and, occasionally, in his coat pocket, all at the same time. On these days, his handwriting, normally so neat, races wildly across the prescription pad, making restorative powder look like rhinoceros powder, and take daily become take daringly. You notice other clues. There's always a faint dusting of something white on his lapel, which he explains away as flour from breakfast or a bit of talcum for the nerves. The consulting room smells faintly of peppermint, coffee, and that peculiar extra note that could either be medicine or a very creative use of baking soda. The glass vials on his desk are always just a little emptier after his morning rounds. And the office dog, normally cautious, now waits under the desk for the inevitable dropped biscuit and a bit of excitement. The entire town has adapted. The pharmacist, Mr. Whipple, stocks extra bottles of nerve tonic and makes sure to set aside a little something special for Dr. Well-Meaning's private collection. The nurse, who is now on her 3rd notebook this month, writes furiously to keep up with his orders. She's learned to wait for the post-cocaine lull before requesting a signature on official documents. On really energetic days, she just leaves a stack of forms and hopes for the best. Patients aren't blind to the transformation either. They notice that Dr. Well-Meaning's appointments are shorter, his advice more effusive, and his willingness to prescribe just a little something for your troubles has reached legendary status. The advice often includes instructions to get plenty of fresh air, keep busy, and, curiously, never trust a rooster with a monocle. The less said about the time he tried to demonstrate the benefits of energetic stretching in the brine, middle of the annual town hall, the better. Gossip runs rampant, of course. Mrs. Dapplewhite, who keeps tabs on everyone from behind her lace curtains, is convinced Dr. Well-Meaning sleeps standing up and eats nothing but lemon drops and nerve tonic. Mr. Plum, who once caught the doctor attempting to repair his own carriage wheel with a tongue depressor, swears he's never seen a man so invigorated by science. The children in town consider a visit to doctor, well-meaning a mix of medical checkup and vaudeville act. Will he forget their name, prescribe a day off school, or perform a juggling trick with his pill bottles? It's not that doctor, well-meaning, is incompetent. Far from it. In his own energetic way, he's attentive, kind, and fiercely proud of his reputation as the most modern doctor in the region. He simply embraced the prevailing wisdom that if a little medicine is good, a lot is better. And if you're going to recommend something, you might as well sample the merchandise, keep things lively. In a way, the whole town has joined in. Everyone's just a little more animated, a little less likely to question the wisdom of a prescription that comes with both a warning label and a recipe for punch. No one really wants to think about malpractice insurance, because in 1903, the best you can hope for is that your doctor's on the same page, or, at the very least, on the same dose. So, next time you visit Dr. Wellmeaning and he suggests a brisk walk, a restorative tonic, and a quick demonstration of the Charleston, just smile and nod. After all, in an era before regulation and second opinions, sometimes the only thing keeping the world spinning is a doctor who really believes in his own medicine. Flip through any 1900s magazine, and you'll see beautiful hand-drawn ads for Bayer's heroin and Vin Mariani cocaine wine. Apparently, the cure for nerves is a good Bordeaux laced with narcotics. What could go wrong? Welcome to the golden age of pharmaceutical optimism, when advertising was less about subtle persuasion and more about making the wildest claims in the boldest fonts. You settle in for the evening with a periodical, looking for recipes or maybe a new knitting pattern, only to be greeted by a double-page spread featuring a radiant family, all aglow from their daily dose of Dr. Fizzlebottom's invigorating syrup. Mother looks rested, father is confidently balancing the family budget, and even the baby is quietly building a scale model of the Eiffel Tower out of toothpicks and pure focus. The sheer artistry is breathtaking. Here's a mother, serene and bright-eyed, surrounded by sparkles and sunlight, raising a glass of Vin Mariani, a red wine infused with a hearty dose of cocaine. The copy reads, "For vigorous women and sensible mothers." In another, a dapper gentleman tips his hat, winks, and assures you that Bayer's heroin is recommended by doctors for coughs, colds, and the blues. You look for the fine print. There isn't any. Just a cheerful drawing of a child on a swing, and the promise of no more troublesome nights. In this era, every problem has a bottled solution, and every bottle has an ad campaign. Are you tired? Try Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound. Can't sleep? A spoonful of Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, now with extra opium, will do the trick. Your nerves frayed from reading too much news? Cocaine throat lozenges will restore your singing voice, your marriage, and possibly your eyesight. Every pharmacy window is a riot of color and promise. Panaceas for the tired, the anxious, the bored, and the unlucky. The language of these ads is irresistible. Marvelous results, modern science in a bottle, a toast to good health, and even better spirits. You half expect to see a testimonial from Queen Victoria herself, or perhaps a glowing endorsement from a cartoon bear who's finally slept through the night. Some products come with celebrity recommendations. Sarah Bernhardt swears by her Vin Mariani, and Thomas Edison credits it for his boundless creativity. You imagine the ad men of the day, sleeves rolled up, dreaming up slogans at the speed of the nearest available stimulant. It's not just the national brands either. The local paper is filled with homegrown wonders. Try Doc Sneed's miracle ointment, good for man, horse, and furniture. There's a guaranteed tonic for nervous brides, a restorative draft for ambitious students, and, for the truly daring, Professor Pepper's Pick Me Up, which promises vivacity, vim, and the ability to ignore your in-laws. Ingredients are optional, pictures are mandatory. If you're lucky enough to see an ad in color, prepare for sensory overload. Bottles gleam like jewels, powders are sprinkled in radiant rainbows, and the people, oh, the people, are impossibly happy. They stand on mountaintops, stroll through sunlit fields, and gaze lovingly at their well-behaved children, all thanks to whatever happened to be legal and slightly soluble in 1903. Of course, the line between medicine and lifestyle choice blurs spectacularly. Some ads promise to cure every ailment known to man. Others assure you that if you just keep taking their syrup, you'll never age, never tire, and never have to worry about anything again, including, apparently, common sense. Yet, looking back, it's oddly endearing. The hope, the confidence, the unshakable belief that modern science, preferably delivered with a splash of Bordeaux and a dash of cocaine, could make everything better. For a brief, glittering moment, the world was just a catchy slogan and a hand-drawn bottle away from happiness. So, next time you're bombarded by targeted ads online, remember, things could be weirder. You could be living in 1903, buying your wellness elixir from a magazine, complete with testimonials, a smiling cartoon doctor, and the quiet conviction that a little narcotic is just what the family needs. Just as things are getting really fun, the local temperance society shows up, horrified that women are drinking, medicating, and gasp. Feeling feelings, someone threatens to write a stern letter to the mayor. You're in the middle of the most productive afternoon of your life. 3 pies cooling, the entire attic alphabetized, and the neighbor's fence fixed, when there's a sudden knock at the door. In March, the temperance ladies. 5 matrons in matching hats, gloves white as judgment, and expressions carved from the same moral granite as their church's cornerstone. They've caught wind of the new nerve tonic sweeping the town and, quite frankly, they're not amused. Their leader, Mrs. Prudence Hawthorne, is a legend. She once convinced the mayor to ban all ungodly cakewalks and single-handedly closed the billiards hall by suggesting it harbored inappropriate cues. Today, she's armed with a pamphlet, an umbrella, and the unshakable conviction that joy is suspicious. Is it true, she demands, that respectable women are partaking of substances not sanctioned by the Ladies' Quarterly? Her entourage nods vigorously, the feather on Mrs. Pomfrey's hat trembling with indignation. You try to explain that it's just a little pick-me-up, strictly medicinal, prescribed by a doctor with an excellent mustache. They are unmoved. The interrogation begins. Have you experienced energy? Has your sleep been irregular? Have you at any point contemplated moving the piano? You hesitate. Everyone's heard about Mrs. Plum and the grand piano incident, but the temperance ladies can smell guilt like a bloodhound on a sugar rush. Their greatest fear isn't just women sipping cocaine-laced wine with their tea. It's women getting ideas. Once you let emotions in, Mrs. Hawthorne warns, there's no telling what might happen. Women might start reading novels with unsupervised endings. They might even, here she lowers her voice to a scandalized whisper, vote. Mrs. Pomfrey faints gracefully into the divan at the very thought. And then comes the threat. If this tonic-fueled mayhem continues, we shall be forced to, dramatic pause, write a letter to the mayor. The mayor, of course, is currently napping off his own restorative elixir. But the temperance ladies do not let facts get in the way of a good campaign. No corner of the community is safe from their crusade. They descend on the pharmacy, demanding to see Mr. Whipple's ledger of sin. They march into the ladies' club and audit the teacups for residue. Even poor Doctor, well-meaning, receives a visit, emerging from his office frazzled and mysteriously covered in flour. It's medicinal, he insists, for the nerves. The ladies remain unconvinced. They hand out leaflets at church, warning of nervous dissolution and domestic collapse. Sunday sermons swell with ominous references to the dangers of modernity. The town's supply of chamomile tea vanishes overnight as nervous housewives scramble to appear less animated and more appropriately sedate. The bake sale committee hastily renames their latest treat from Vim biscuits to virtue cakes. Still, not everyone is cowed. The women of the town, newly invigorated by the very tonic the temperance ladies fear, respond with quiet rebellion. They share recipes for herbal cordials, swap coded notes about upcoming reading circles, and develop an underground trade in refined sugar for medicinal purposes. Mrs. Plum leads a covert midnight dance in the parlor. No men, no music, just the sweet freedom of movement, and maybe a tiny dash of tonic in the lemonade. In the end, the temperance ladies make their mark. Doilies on every table, pamphlets in every mailbox, and a general uptick in church attendance, if only for the gossip. Their letter to the mayor is lost somewhere between urgent and miscellaneous, and the nerve tonic continues to circulate, albeit in teacups labeled special brew. If the price of feeling feelings is a stern look from Mrs. Hawthorne and a little extra chamomile, so be it. In a town where energy, laughter, and even a hint of rebellion are suspect, a good tonic and a well-timed wink goes a long way. For a while, it really seems to work. Everyone's mood improves, energy skyrockets, and the symptoms vanish. But then the supplies run out, the pharmacy closes early, and suddenly everyone's a little too invested in the mail delivery schedule. For a magical stretch of weeks, your whole town enters what might charitably be called the age of peak productivity. No ailment lasts more than an afternoon. Colds evaporate. Backaches turn into spontaneous poker parties. And the general malaise that hung over the post office like a wet blanket is replaced with an air of feverish optimism. Every letter begins, "I've never felt better." The mayor completes his long-threatened project to alphabetize the tax rolls. The ladies' club doubles its membership and produces so many lemon cakes the local hens are staging a walkout. Children skip through the streets with suspiciously clear sinuses. Elders declare themselves cured of rheumatism and other bothers. And even the local dogs appear to have found a new lease on life. The village priest marvels at the number of confessions delivered at triple speed. Mrs. Plum, formerly famous for her melancholy, now hosts sunrise calisthenics and evening lectures on positive thinking. Dr. Well-meaning is hailed as a genius. Mr. Whipple is the most popular man in town, at least until the next shipment. But as every wise grandmother knows, nothing this good lasts forever. The cocaine supply, once as reliable as sunrise, begins to dry up. At first, it's just a delay. The wagon from the city arrives late. The pharmacist makes apologies, and people shuffle home with a promise that the tonic will be back by Thursday. Thursday comes and goes. By Friday, there are rumors. Someone's been buying extra, the supplier is on holiday. The city's doctors are keeping it all for themselves. Accusations swirl faster than Mrs. Plum can organize a committee. Soon, it's not just the tonic that's missing. It's the mood. The sparkle fades from town. Meetings grow tense and short-tempered. Someone suggests the next bake sale use plain biscuits instead of the special ones, and nearly starts a riot. People who once laughed off setbacks now eye the mailman like he's a one-man parade of disappointments. The grocer can't keep chocolate in stock. Mr. Whipple, for the first time in memory, locks the pharmacy door after hours, emerging only to field desperate inquiries about anything, absolutely anything, just to take the edge off. A subtle malaise creeps in. The aches and pains that vanished begin to tiptoe back. Sleepless nights return, along with the midnight creak of stairs as restless townsfolk pace their parlors and count the number of days since their last dose. The children, previously racing around the playground, are suddenly much less interested in outdoor activity and more likely to grumble over homework. Even the pets revert to their old routines. Cats reclaim the best nap spots, and the family dog is once again unimpressed by dinner scraps. The social fabric starts to fray. Small squabbles at the market blossom into full-blown arguments about bread prices and whose turn it is to mind the school gate. The ladies' club breaks into factions. One side wants to write to the supplier, another wants to hold a vigil, and a third is furiously researching alternative remedies, mostly consisting of extra strong tea and a return to old-fashioned grumbling. All eyes are on the postman, who develops a nervous twitch. Each morning, a hopeful crowd gathers at the edge of town to see if a package will arrive. When it doesn't, they disperse, slower, quieter, spirits just a little lower than before. Doctor, well-meaning, sensing the tide has turned, offers cheerful advice, brisk walks, wholesome soups, and thinking happy thoughts, but it's not quite the same. Restorative powder is a hard act to follow. Thus, the great experiment ends not with a bang, but with a yawn. The town settles back into its old rhythm. Slower, softer, and just a little more suspicious of miracle cures. And if anyone asks, well, the official story is that nothing ever happened, except, perhaps, a brief, beautiful moment when no one had a care in the world, and the mailman was the most important man alive. Who could have guessed that abruptly stopping your nerve tonic would make things worse? Welcome to the world's least relaxing withdrawal, featuring headaches, sadness, and the sudden return of your husband's opinions. At first, you try to keep a brave face. You tell yourself you never really needed the nerve tonic, it was just a passing phase. Like that time everyone in town tried to learn the waltz, or when Mrs. Plum insisted on fermenting her own cabbage. But as the days drag on, you realize the empty spot on the kitchen shelf is starting to look like a portal to another dimension. A dimension where you actually have to cope with your feelings using nothing but willpower, lemon tea, and the faint hope that someone else in the house is taking it worse than you. The first sign is the headache, not the gentle, maybe I need a nap kind, but the kind that feels like a tiny marching band has set up shop behind your eyes. Then comes the irritability. The children, who previously seemed charming and full of potential, are now just loud. The cat's midnight antics, once endearing, now seem like a personal attack. Your neighbor waves, and you're tempted to wave back, preferably with a breadstick hurled in their general direction. Sleep, already a distant memory, decides to become a full-blown stranger. You toss and turn, counting sheep, cracks in the ceiling, and the number of times your husband clears his throat to remind you he still exists. He, of course, is having the time of his life. Without the peculiar energy you once exuded, you're no longer rearranging the pantry at dawn or planning charity events in your sleep. Instead, you're just tired, achy, and deeply aware of every one of his opinions about the best way to store potatoes. Social life suffers too. The ladies' club, once the bustling hub of cocaine-fueled productivity, is now a support group for people who just can't anymore. Mrs. Bennett weeps openly over her lemon drizzle cake, declaring it too lemony and not nearly enough drizzle. The reading circle is on hiatus. No one has the energy to host, let alone alphabetize the teacups. Even Mrs. Dapplewhite, always the optimist, has started knitting a scarf with the word UGH stitched into the pattern. Dr. Well-meaning, ever the optimist, insists that this is just a transitional phase. He prescribes brisk walks, chamomile tea, and positive thinking, which is about as helpful as using a lace doily as an umbrella. He offers to let you sample his new herbal blend, which tastes like defeat and disappointment, and doesn't so much soothe the nerves as remind you why cocaine was so popular in the first place. The household itself begins to unravel. Dishes pile up, laundry multiplies, and the once pristine pantry reverts to its natural state of chaos. The family dog, used to a daily regimen of walks and treats, now gives you a look that says, "Really? This is it?" You want to apologize, but it's hard to form a coherent sentence when your brain is locked in a fog of withdrawal and regret. Soon, everyone in town is searching for substitutes. Some try coffee, bad idea. Others attempt breathing exercises, which mostly results in communal sighing and a new appreciation for deep, existential groaning. The postman is still eyed with suspicion, but now it's more out of habit than hope. Mrs. Plum, desperate for relief, attempts to recreate the tonic using a combination of sherry, cough syrup, and positive affirmations. The results are mixed. There are, of course, a few upsides. The house is quieter. The days are longer, sometimes painfully so. Your heart, no longer racing, remembers what it feels like to take things slow. You discover that not everything needs to be fixed, scrubbed, or reorganized immediately. Sometimes, it's enough to just sit, breathe, and wait for the next wave of absurdity to roll through. In the end, withdrawal is less about what you've lost and more about learning to survive the ordinary. You pour yourself another cup of lemon tea. Listen to your husband's latest theory on potato storage, and think, maybe tomorrow you'll feel a little better. Maybe you'll even sleep. Or maybe you'll just survive, which, in this particular historical moment, is more than enough. Soon, suspiciously energetic women start to attract attention, and the government decides maybe it's time to regulate the fun. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 is the beginning of the end for cocaine prescriptions. And for late-night pantry reorganizations, it begins innocently enough. The town busybody, Mrs. Prudence Hawthorne, notices that every book club meeting now runs 3 hours long, and half the members are rearranging the chairs in color order. Whispers circulate about Mrs. Plum, who alphabetized her soup cans in Latin and started jogging in circles around the church at sunrise. The children are winning every three-legged race, and the family dog is now known as the local king of fetch. Even Dr. Well-meaning's office, once a haven for the quietly anxious, now buzzes with the energy of a beehive and smells faintly of optimism and peppermint. But all good things, especially those involving prescription stimulants and a suspicious lack of sleep, must come to an end. Reformers in big cities begin to fret. Journalists pen worried essays about household nerve tonics and the strange case of the insomniac housewife. Local politicians, looking for an easy win, declare themselves the champions of common sense and decent sleep schedules. Suddenly, the national mood pivots. If you're having fun, you're probably doing something wrong. Cue the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, a landmark piece of legislation and the first step toward modern regulation. Lawmakers, wide-eyed with civic responsibility and perhaps a little jealous of everyone's newfound productivity, march through Congress with banners proclaiming, "It's time to know what's in your medicine. From now on, tonics must be labeled with actual ingredients." And the Wilder claims, will make your husband agree with you, are gently but firmly discouraged. Back in your small town, the news arrives with all the drama of a thunderstorm. The pharmacy window is plastered with new signs, now free from undisclosed powders, tonics tested for purity. The ladies' club is divided. Half demand to see the new labels, the other half argue that reading labels counts as agitation and ought to be avoided for health reasons. Dr. Well-meaning, ever the pragmatist, pivots overnight. Out go the cocaine powders. In come new restorative blends, herbs, bitters, and something called calmative syrup that tastes like despair and brown sugar. He holds a town meeting, explaining that progress marches on and that there's absolutely no need to worry, which is always code for it's time to worry. The crowd listens politely, but everyone's thinking the same thing. When did we all become so tired? Life without unregulated nerve tonics returns, slowly, and with more yawning. The mailman breathes a sigh of relief as crowds stop hounding him for miracle deliveries. The grocer notices a dramatic dip in the sale of lemon cakes and candlesticks. The family dog, now dethroned, resumes napping on the porch. But not everyone is ready to give up the dream. An underground market for the good stuff emerges. Recipes are whispered at bake sales and scribbled in the margins of church bulletins. Mrs. Plum quietly trades jars of C0caine jam with her neighbor, promising, "It'll perk you right up, dear." The town's new favorite excuse for lingering restlessness is bad weather or the stress of modern living. For the first time in years, sleep starts to creep back into houses. The furniture stays put through the night. No one feels compelled to dust the rafters after midnight. The ladies' club finds new pastimes, knitting, and occasionally just staring at the wall together, remembering the good old days when the only thing stopping them was the pharmacy's business hours. And so the era of household miracle cures fades, replaced by regulation, sleep, and a kind of nostalgia for the days when a trip to Dr. Well-meaning meant you'd leave his office with a twinkle in your eye, and the overwhelming urge to alphabetize your neighbor's pantry. If there's a lesson here, it's that all parties end, some by law, some by exhaustion, but most by a sternly worded government circular. Rest assured, though, as long as there are rules, someone will be quietly, politely, looking for loopholes, preferably with a cup of tea and just a hint of something extra in the sugar bowl. With cocaine on the way out, doctors quickly pivot to prescribing tranquilizers and sedatives for nerves. The only thing scarier than cocaine-fueled cleaning is barbiturate-fueled napping. In the blink of an eye, the era of energetic, sleepless households comes to a gentle, drowsy halt. The pharmacy shelves, once a glittering parade of invigorating tonics, are quietly restocked with new products promising deep rest, soothing slumber, and the kind of calm that only comes from being briefly unconscious. Dr. Well-meaning, never one to miss a trend, swaps his silver cocaine scoop for a tiny medicine dropper and a chart of recommended nap times. The transition is not subtle. One week, your neighbor is polishing the banister at 2 a.m. The next, she's napping in the sun at noon, unbothered by the dust motes dancing on her untouched baseboards. The ladies' club, former champions of the high-speed bake sale, now convenes on velvet sofas to compare sleep schedules, herbal compresses, and the newest restorative draft Dr. Well-meaning is pushing with extra barbiturates for when your nerves need a proper nap. Gone is the era of anxious optimism and endless productivity. Now, life moves in slow motion. The only frantic activity left is the rush to get home before the sedative kicks in. Even Mrs. Plum, who once reorganized her entire attic before breakfast, now nods off in the middle of her own garden party, gently snoring while a bewildered Mr. Plum tries to remember where the lemonade is kept. Daytime conversation changes too. Instead of swapping recipes for caffeinated lemonade, women trade tips on the softest eye masks and the best way to fold a blanket for maximum therapeutic compression. Afternoon tea becomes afternoon snooze. And the most popular reading material is a booklet titled 50 Ways to Enjoy Your Nap. The town seamstress starts selling padded slippers for restful wandering. The local baker tries a new line of pastries called nap cakes, guaranteed to put you to sleep before you finish your second bite. Of course, not everyone adapts smoothly. The family dog, confused by the sudden drop in activity, develops a new hobby: rearranging shoes. The cat, always ahead of the curve, perfects the art of sleeping for 16 hours a day and is declared the town's new wellness guru. Children, suddenly aware that no one is watching, invent a new game called Who Can Build the Tallest Fort Before Mom Wakes Up? The answer, most days, is very tall indeed. Side effects abound. With everyone so relaxed, the post office develops a backlog. The mailman keeps falling asleep under the big oak tree. The local choir's hymns become slower and more meditative, with more humming and fewer high notes. At the ladies' club, heated debates about the best window polish are replaced by long, companionable silences, punctuated only by the occasional soft snore. Doctor, well-meaning, once so animated, now sees patients in a darkened office, lights dimmed, and chairs slightly reclined for maximum comfort. His new catchphrase? A well-rested mind is a healthy mind, repeated gently as he hands out tiny brown bottles and encouraging pamphlets with titles like Letting Go, Embracing the Nap Within. For those who miss the old days, there's a quiet nostalgia for the wild, sparkling era of cocaine-fueled energy. But most townsfolk, still slightly groggy, agree that a little peace isn't so bad, even if it means fewer midnight cleaning sessions and more mornings spent searching for misplaced slippers. The world turns slower, softer, and, for the first time in years, people begin to dream again. Sometimes, literally. Sometimes just with their eyes closed in the afternoon Sunday. The great switcheroo is complete. The only thing left to worry about is sleeping through dinner. And maybe, just maybe, learning to enjoy a little boredom between naps. What did we learn? Well, doctors will try almost anything if you complain loudly enough. Also, always read the label, and maybe keep your emotional outbursts to a minimum until modern medicine catches up. Let's be honest. The early 1900s was less a golden age of medicine and more a test kitchen for human resilience. There's a kind of earnest, wide-eyed optimism to it all. A belief that if you just mix enough mysterious powders in the right proportions, you'll stumble upon the cure for everything from heartbreak to hemorrhoids. And if it works a little too well, at least you'll have a very clean house and an extremely organized pantry. The most obvious lesson is this. Nobody had a clue what was actually safe, but everyone was very confident about everything. If it sparkled, fizzed, or arrived in a handsome glass bottle, it was as good as certified. Side effects were only discovered when the cat started sleeping upside down or grandma took apart the mantel clock at 3 a.m. If something worked fast, it was a miracle. If it worked too fast, you probably wrote a testimonial about it at 2 a.m. using your newly acquired ability to type with both hands and feet. There's also the enduring truth that, in the absence of real solutions, people will find a way to cope. In 1903, this meant turning a blind eye to the fine print and embracing whatever new elixir the town doctor or traveling salesman handed out with a smile. After all, If Dr. Well-meaning's diploma looked slightly damp and misspelled, that only made his signature more mysterious. If the label said, guaranteed to relieve, who were you to argue? Community played its own role. The ladies' club swapped not just recipes, but tips for the strongest nerve tonic. Try adding a dash of lemon. It cuts the bitterness and the existential dread. Mothers pass down secrets for making the most of rest cures. Bring your own pillow and an alibi for your enthusiasm. Children learned early that if the medicine tasted like cherries, you'd either nap for a week or start seeing colors in the wallpaper. Reading the label was an act of self-defense, and often an exercise in creative interpretation. For nervousness, ennui, restlessness, mild outbreaks of jazz, and general malaise, if you could pronounce every ingredient, you were either a pharmacist or a time traveler. Nobody really knew what tincture of heroic vigor or extract of vitality meant, but it sounded impressive. When in doubt, just pour, stir, and hope for the best. As for the doctors, they did their level best, armed with a few textbooks, a lot of bravado, and an endless supply of glass jars. If you were lucky, they'd prescribe something that didn't make you reorganize the barn at midnight. If you weren't, at least you'd have a story to tell the grandchildren, or a cautionary tale to be whispered at the next ladies' club meeting. Perhaps the greatest lesson is humility. The realization that every era thinks it has all the answers, only to be proven wrong by the next round of exciting developments. What seems obvious in hindsight was a genuine leap of faith at the time. The quest to soothe the nerves may have led down some strange powdery alleys, but at least it was done with hope, a touch of style, and a communal sense that tomorrow's cure was always just one bottle away. And finally, there's the lesson that, when in doubt, take everything, especially miracle cures, with a grain of salt, a healthy dose of skepticism, and maybe a cup of tea instead. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that the human desire for relief, comfort, and a little peace of mind is as unstoppable as it is occasionally ridiculous. So, next time you're tempted by a bottle of something new and improved, remember the great nerve tonic experiment of the early 1900s. And maybe, just maybe, check the label first, just in case it comes with side effects like excessive wallpaper admiration, late-night baking, or the sudden urge to alphabetize the family dog. As the world finally falls quiet, you lie awake on your lace pillowcase, wondering if your nerves are actually better or if you just missed another dose. Either way, sleep is coming, eventually, once the cocaine wears off. The house is still. The moon glimmers on the starched white curtains, throwing shadows across the familiar chaos of your perfectly organized and then disorganized pantry. Somewhere in the dark, the clock ticks steadily, one of the few things in your life you haven't felt compelled to take apart and reassemble in alphabetical order. The air is scented with a mixture of lavender water, lemon biscuits, and the lingering ghost of restorative powder, now officially out of stock but still circulating in stories, and slightly suspicious teacups. You close your eyes and listen to the quiet hum of your nerves, each one pulsing in gentle protest after a day of highs, lows, and frantic housework. It's hard not to smile at the memory of the ladies' club, caught between euphoria and exhaustion, clutching their teacups with white-knuckled determination and wondering aloud if they'll ever find a new hobby that's half as exciting as nerve tonic-fueled biscuit baking. Outside, a cool breeze rattles the window panes, and you pull the quilt a little tighter, grateful for the calm, even if it feels unfamiliar after so many weeks of perpetual motion. You wonder if the rest of the town is finally sleeping, or if Mrs. Plum is out there somewhere, alphabetizing her neighbor's rose bushes by moonlight. The cat, once a ball of caffeinated fur, has resumed her dignified evening patrols, making sure that no shadow lingers too long and that the family dog stays on his own side of the hearth. There's comfort in the routine, the slow winding down, the nightly ritual of brushing your hair, folding away the day's anxieties, and promising yourself that tomorrow you'll remember to take things slower, even if you suspect you'll never quite shake the urge to dust the mantelpiece one last time before sunrise. Your mind drifts to the absurdities of it all, the endless doctor's visits, each one promising a new solution for female nerves or melancholy, and the sheer optimism with which every new bottle was greeted. How quickly hope arrived, and how quickly it vanished again, leaving behind only a trail of empty vials, lively gossip, and the sort of tiredness that comes from living life at twice the recommended speed. The best part, perhaps, is that despite everything, despite the misdiagnoses, the miracle cures, and the parade of side effects, you made it through. You survived the world's most exciting prescription and lived to tell the tale and maybe sell the rights to your story to the next generation of medical skeptics. You endured the housework marathons, the sleepless nights, the suspicious glances from the temperance ladies, and even the great tonic shortage of O4. Tomorrow, you'll wake to a quieter house, a slower morning, and maybe a little more peace than you remember. The world will move on, with or without the latest pharmaceutical fad, and you'll find new ways to cope, ways that don't involve reorganizing the pantry by moon phase or deciphering Morse code in the wallpaper pattern. So, as you settle deeper into your pillow, let yourself be proud of the wild, ridiculous journey you've taken just to reach the edge of sleep. You've survived hysteria, nerve tonics, wild swings of energy and exhaustion, and emerged on the other side, still stubborn, still hopeful, and still ready for tomorrow's ordinary miracles. Good night, Victorian patient. May your dreams be as gentle as chamomile tea, and may your nerves, for once, let you rest. The circus is in town, and right next to the bearded lady and the world's smallest horse, you'll find Professor Jebediah's traveling medicine show. His secret cure-all? A medicinal powder with a wink, a nod, and enough cocaine to power the Ferris wheel. It's the only place where you can buy a bottle, get a pep talk, and enjoy a magic trick, then realize you haven't blinked in 20 minutes. It's dusk, and the carnival grounds are alive with the clatter of hooves, the clanging of bell games, and the distant sound of the world's worst brass band. Just beyond the caramel corn stand and a suspiciously rickety carousel, you spot a brightly painted wagon draped in velvet banners that read Professor Jebediah's Marvelous Restoratives. The smell of sawdust, sweat, and whatever's brewing in the medicine bottles fills the air. Eager townsfolk gather in anticipation, clutching nickels, handkerchiefs, and a faint hope that today will be the day their bunions, worries, or mother-in-law's visits finally meet their match. Professor Jebediah himself is a showman of the highest order. He sweeps onto the makeshift stage in a coat with so many pockets it could double as a traveling apothecary. His hair is slicked back with bear grease, and his mustache bristles with promise. Step right up, he booms, tossing sample vials into the crowd like confetti. Are you tired? Nervous? Does your heart lack pep, your feet lack spring, or your chickens refuse to lay? No matter your ailment, his cure can fix it, and possibly turn you into a champion horseshoe tosser as a side effect. Behind him, a pair of assistants in matching striped trousers demonstrate the wonders of his products. A man with a limp takes a single spoonful and leaps onto a barrel. A woman with the vapors fans herself, then suddenly starts reciting the Gettysburg Address backwards. The crowd oohs and ahs. And just in case anyone doubts the magic, Professor Jebediah pulls a rabbit out of his hat, then offers it a taste of powder, just to prove there are no hard feelings between science and showmanship. Children swarm the front, eyes wide, while their parents try to calculate how much medicine they can buy before payday. The secret, of course, is that Professor Jebediah's marvelous restorative is less about rare herbs and more about special imported powders from far-off lands. For a quarter, you get a bottle, a handwritten guarantee, and a complimentary lecture about the wonders of modern progress. With every purchase comes the promise of renewed vigor, radiant skin, and the sudden, inexplicable urge to reorganize the entire root cellar. The real spectacle, though, happens when the sun goes down. The lamps are lit, the shadows lengthen, and the medicine show takes on an air of feverish excitement. People crowd together, whispering about neighbors who took 2 doses and didn't sleep for 3 days, or about old Mrs. Goodwin, who claims she saw angels in the hayloft after trying the extra strength formula. Whether it's the magic tricks, the medicine, or the contagious optimism, everyone leaves Professor Jebediah's wagon feeling a little more hopeful and a lot more awake. The next day, the wagon is gone, the banners rolled up, and the only evidence of the medicine show is a trail of empty bottles, a few wildly energetic children, and the lingering sound of Professor Jebediah's promises echoing over the fields. The townsfolk are left with a fresh batch of restorative to get them through the week, and stories to tell until the next circus rolls through. Because in the age before fine print and government oversight, all you needed was a little faith, a pinch of powder, and the willingness to believe that under the big top, anything, absolutely anything, might be possible for just a quarter and a wink. It's 1904, your baby won't sleep, and the neighbors are complaining about the noise. What do? You reach for Dr. Wiggly's cocaine teething syrup. Of course, 1 drop on the gums, and Junior's not just sleeping, he's inventing calculus. Modern parents fret about screen time. In the 1900s, it was more about not losing track of the medicine spoon. You stare at your restless, red-cheeked child as he howls with the power of a foghorn, cheeks glowing and fists balled. The advice of the day is unanimous. Give the poor thing a drop of syrup and get some sleep. Dr. Wiggly's label promises sweet dreams, quiet nights, and no more nerves for parent or child. There's a cherubic baby on the box, smiling so wide you start to wonder if he sampled his own product. The instructions are simple: 1 drop, as needed, until the baby or household is at peace. Guaranteed results. There's no mention of side effects, unless you count the fine print, which just says, also suitable for grumpy uncles and talkative aunts. You dab the syrup onto a little spoon and, with trembling optimism, offer it to your tiny banshee. Within minutes, your baby's wailing softens, eyes widen, and suddenly he's serenely stacking blocks into a scale model of the Eiffel Tower. There's a hush in the nursery, broken only by the gentle clink of wooden toys and the sound of you slumping onto the nearest chaise with exhausted relief. At last, silence, blissful, miraculous, and ever so slightly unnerving. Word travels fast. Soon, every mother on the block is stopping by the pharmacy for her own bottle of Dr. Wiggly's Wonder Syrup. Mr. Whipple can't keep it in stock. Teething? Tantrums? Mysterious midnight acrobatics? There's a syrup for that. The neighborhood is transformed overnight. The babies are sleeping, sometimes with their eyes open. The parents are smiling, and even the family dog has given up his post by the crib and returned to the noble art of napping. The pediatric miracle becomes the stuff of legend. Aunt Martha swears little Billy learned his times tables after just 2 doses. The schoolmistress reports record high attendance. Nobody's homesick, though several students are now enthusiastically reciting the Declaration of Independence. Backward, during nap time, Grandma, who always warned about spoiling children, is now secretly dosing her bridge club with a teaspoon before every hand. But, as with every shortcut in history, there's a catch. The initial peace and quiet give way to other surprises. Babies who once napped soundly are now wide awake at odd hours, eyes gleaming with suspicious clarity. The family cat finds herself pursued by a crawling toddler who can suddenly outmaneuver furniture and adult siblings. Children start waking up at sunrise, full of ambitious projects and an uncanny ability to rearrange the kitchen drawers. Parents are caught off guard. One mother is found alphabetizing her baby's rattles, while Junior hums and plots a daring escape from the crib. Nap time becomes less a rest and more a strategic standoff. Will the syrup work? Or will the child start composing original music on the xylophone? Bedtime stories are replaced by the "let's all close our eyes and pretend" game, which works only half as well as promised. The doctors, of course, are enthusiastic. Dr. Well-meaning beams with pride at the lack of tears in his waiting room. A triumph of modern medicine, he declares. Even as Mrs. Plum whispers about the night her baby organized all the spoons by size, color, and temperature. Still, nobody questions the wisdom of the syrup, at least not out loud. The neighbors are grateful for the peace. Parents reclaim a few precious hours of sleep. The children, meanwhile, ride their newfound energy as far as it will take them, right up until the moment the town's supply of syrup runs out. In 1904, teething trouble meant something very different. It was less about molars and more about the wild, sugar-dusted ride that came with every drop of Dr. Wiggly's cocaine teething syrup. Modern parents, count your blessings. Sometimes, the old solutions really were too good to be true. Afternoon tea is a social minefield when everyone's on a nerve tonic. Victorian etiquette books suddenly need whole new chapters. How to avoid talking over everyone, when to stop reorganizing your hostess's bookshelves, and the polite way to admit you haven't slept since Thursday. You step into Mrs. Plum's parlor and are immediately greeted by a flurry of activity. Instead of the usual polite hush, the room hums with overlapping conversations, the clink of teacups, and the sound of 3 different women offering to straighten the lace doilies at once. No one sits for long. Tea is poured. Biscuits vanish. And someone, probably Mrs. Dapplewhite, has started alphabetizing the sugar cubes. The latest etiquette challenge isn't balancing your teacup or remembering which fork to use for cake. It's navigating an entire gathering where everyone's nerves are running on pharmaceutical jet fuel. Mrs. Plum, the perfect hostess, dashes from guest to guest with the agility of a squirrel on espresso. Her hat is slightly askew and her smile is fixed somewhere between delighted and terrified. She offers second and third helpings of everything, mostly because she's misplaced the serving spoons and has decided it's easier to just keep passing things around. Polite conversation, that sacred art, becomes a group sport. Each story is interrupted by at least 2 helpful suggestions, 3 anxious questions, and 4 unrelated anecdotes. Miss Tomlinson tries to share her recipe for lemon scones, but halfway through, Mrs. Elmsworth interrupts to inquire about the best way to remove stains from lace napkins, and suddenly everyone's describing the precise order in which their grandmothers polished silverware. The real minefield comes with social improvements. It is considered good manners, in some circles, to help tidy up after tea. But today, helpful tidying becomes a competitive sport. Someone starts reorganizing the bookshelf by color, another straightens every picture frame, and a heated debate erupts over whether the armchairs should face the window or the fireplace. Mrs. Plum, desperate to keep the peace, suggests a group breathing exercise But this only inspires Mrs. Gilling to open every window for optimal airflow. Within minutes, half the parlour curtains are billowing in the breeze, and the cat is nowhere to be found. The old rules of etiquette simply can't keep up. Can you ask your hostess for more tea if you've already had 5 cups? Is it rude to stand and stretch mid-conversation? How does one discreetly excuse herself for a lap around the block to burn off excess tonic? And what do you say when your neighbour confesses she hasn't slept in 3 days but is pretty sure she's solved her husband's tax problems and the mystery of the missing umbrella? Even the etiquette books, usually the final word on propriety, are flummoxed. Chapter 14. Social graces for the modern lady now includes helpful tips like: try not to speak in paragraphs, offer your flummox assistance, but avoid repainting the furniture. And remember, it is impolite to comment on another guest's rate of respiration. Subtle hints about not rearranging the host's pantry are slipped into the margins, right next to reminders to breathe between sentences. By the time the sun sets, Mrs. Plum's parlour looks like it's hosted a small, well-mannered hurricane. The guests depart in clusters, promising to meet again soon and possibly bring their own coasters. The air is thick with plans, new committees, reading circles, and maybe a support group for ladies who haven't napped since Easter. After the last guest leaves, Mrs. Plum surveys her domain. The curtains are tangled, the biscuits are gone, and the armchairs are, oddly, all facing different directions. She smiles, pours herself one last cup of decaffeinated tea, and resolves to write a letter to the publishers of etiquette for every occasion. Surely, she thinks, they'll want a chapter on socializing in the age of the overstimulated. Because in 1904, the hardest part of a polite gathering isn't remembering your manners. It's remembering to pause long enough for someone else to speak, or, at the very least, to breathe. So, tonight, as you close your eyes and let the absurdities of the past fade into the darkness, maybe take a moment to appreciate the deep, deep weirdness that is human history. You've just spent a night in the early 1900s where a trip to the doctor for anxiety meant walking out with a jar of pharmaceutical-grade cocaine and the heartfelt assurance that it was just what the nerves need. You survived a waiting room scented with camphor and confusion, prescriptions handed out like party favors, and neighbors who suddenly developed a passion for both self-improvement and scrubbing the baseboards at 3 a.m. You endured the endless parade of miracle tonics, doctors with questionable diplomas, and the societal belief that any inconvenient emotion could be fixed with just a little more white powder. But as wild as it all sounds, you have to hand it to the people of the past. They got by however they could, with the best and worst ideas their time could offer. They trusted in science, in advertisements, in their doctors, and in the endless march of new and improved medicine, even when it led straight through a pharmacy aisle lined with bottles of pure, uncut disaster. They endured the side effects, the scandals, and the long caffeine-fueled nights, all in search of a little relief and maybe a moment's peace. So, as you tuck yourself in tonight, under clean sheets, in a quiet room, free from the need to explain your nervous disposition to anyone with a handlebar mustache, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the generations before you. They experimented, so you don't have to. They lived, laughed, and, sometimes, hallucinated their way through the growing pains of medicine, so that you could one day get a prescription that doesn't come with a side of existential dread or a risk of inventing jazz at midnight. History, as it turns out, is not only hilarious and horrifying, but also a reminder of how stubborn, hopeful, and endlessly inventive people can be. We survived the era of cocaine cures, and we'll probably survive whatever comes next, too. So breathe deep, relax, and drift off, grateful that the only thing in your medicine cabinet tonight is maybe a bottle of melatonin and a half-melted cough drop. Sleep well, and remember, no matter how bizarre life gets, at least your doctor isn't prescribing you anything that might accidentally make you clean the entire house before dawn. Good night.